The internet can be good. Sometimes. According to the Community Tech Network, a non-profit for disabled people based in San Francisco, the internet can reduce isolation by helping folks stay in touch with their family and friends and find community online, as well as helping individuals find more career opportunities through online job searching. It also provides a chance to work remotely. This is even more so the case for disabled people with limited ability or opportunity to socialize in the outside world, with transport and venue accessibility being a common barrier. In social spaces online, the internet can provide anonymity and solidarity, going back to spaces that preceded social media as we know it today, such as chat rooms and forums. Able Here, a disability-focused forum established in 2006, continues to be a valuable source of community to its members to this day. On Facebook, there are many communities in the form of groups, which can be important to those with rarer conditions, who may not know anyone offline with the same condition. In the past 5 years, short-form video has become a dominant means of media consumption, with many disabled creators using this medium to connect with those with the same disabilities and to educate those without them. They often provide insights into how their disability affects their life and educate the wider world about their experiences, as well as how to be more respectful and considerate. Crucially though, disabled people show how they have identities beyond their disabilities. In spite of the accessibility issues online, as well as pervasive discrimination and bullying, disabled people use social media on their own terms. For many creators, this can be a valuable source of income, especially because of more limited job options, as well as a cost of living crisis and additional costs associated with disabilities. This is often the case on TikTok Lives, in which users can send gifts with monetary value. These are beneficial to creators who nonetheless have a complicated relationship with their audience, having to deal with abuse, pity, and prying questions. The picture is complicated further by people being featured in TikTok Lives who have limited ability to consent, leaving them open to exploitation for financial gain. For this reason, and also the fact this is a sensitive topic, I'll be blurring most of the faces of the people in this video. I'm also not disabled or medically trained, so I'll be deferring to reputable professionals throughout. With that being said, let's take a look into the complicated ethics of disability content. According to the UN, disabled people have the same rights as everyone else to freedom, respect, equality, and dignity. The reality of this is different for many disabled people. Their treatment varies significantly by the country in which they live, affected by factors such as economic development, as well as regulations requiring accommodation for disabled people, which mandate access to services such as treatment and public transport. For example, some countries have well-funded universal healthcare, while others do not. Despite the strides some countries have made, disabled people near universally face challenges that aren't necessary with modern technology and support systems. The history of treatment of disabled people is complex, and well beyond the scope of this video. Watch Exceptional Individuals' video on the topic for a more comprehensive view, but I'll talk about some key examples. Recorded instances of accommodations for disabled people go as far back as ancient Greece, where provisions were found in temples for disabled access. In sharp contrast is the 12 Tables, the foundation of Roman law, which required the stoning to death of disabled children. Things were particularly bleak in the European Middle Ages, where illness was considered to be caused by demons, for which exorcism was considered a suitable remedy. Performing this act was even considered a basis for sainthood. Unfortunately, this state of affairs didn't improve much with the Enlightenment, during which the concept of an ideal norm was developed by Adolphe Quetelet, a 19th century Belgian statistician, sociologist, mathematician, and astronomer. According to Notes on the History of Normality, Reflections on the Work of Quetelet and Galton, he argued that it was by measuring a large number of people, with their physical deviances, one would come closest to the ideal of what a human being should look like. Disabled people were considered a deviation from the norm, and this line of thinking followed through to the rise of eugenics, which entails an elimination of those deviating from the prescribed norm. The 19th century also saw the advent of commercially successful quote-unquote freak shows, becoming a booming business, as people with physical abnormalities grew into a highly profitable market, specifically in Europe and the United States. These shows were mostly comprised of people with physical abnormalities, although some had learned talents such as sword swallowing. The Industrial Revolution also saw a re-evaluation of the function and purpose of human bodies, with humans expected to perform like the machines they work with. This dangerous industrial equipment inevitably created more disabilities, with the victims required to keep working in spite of them. There were some gradual improvements in the 20th century, with the civil rights movement inspiring disabled people to pursue rights for themselves too. However, the Americans with Disabilities Act wouldn't be passed until 1990, and disabled people continue to fight for basic rights to this day. In recent years, social media has been credited with raising awareness of disabilities, with a salient example being autism. A 2022 article from The Conversation talks about this, pointing to influencers who have raised awareness on TikTok, such as Paige Lael and Nicole Parrish. This is especially significant because autistic people have historically been excluded from telling their own stories, with a 2021 review of Australian news articles from 2016 to 2018 finding that only 16 of 1,351 stories included first-hand perspectives from autistic people. Autistic people have even been excluded from charities supposed to serve them, such as Autism Speaks, which only had one autistic person on its 30-person board as late as 2021. In the decades prior to short-form videos' explosion in popularity, diagnoses had skyrocketed, with one study finding that they had increased in the UK by 787% from 1998 to 2018, with previous underdiagnoses among women and girls being a factor in this. The increase in autism-related content has simultaneously complicated the picture though, with a pressing issue being self-diagnosis. Some respected health organisations and charities consider it valid, such as the NHS, which suggests the AQ10 test to get a general idea, and only advising pursuing a professional diagnosis if the subject feels it likely to be beneficial to them. Many people also don't have access to the healthcare services required for a professional diagnosis. However, some professionals say there are risks associated with self-diagnosis, such as Diane Franz, PhD, a paediatric psychologist at Children's Hospital in New Orleans, who claims that it is likely to be inaccurate, which will not allow the individual to be eligible for services needed to support them in all aspects of their lives. The risk of misdiagnosis is increased by the amount of misinformation in autism-related content, with some studies estimating over 70% of videos to contain it. It's not an uncommon pattern on the internet more broadly. The desire for views and engagement often supersedes accuracy. Some medical professionals have also expressed concern about the risk of overdiagnosis, such as Dr. Alan Francis, who helped loosen the definition of autism in the 90s, and now fears it contributed to the creation of diagnostic fads that resulted in the massive overdiagnosis of autistic disorders in children and adults. In addition to this, Joseph O'Brien, manager of the Behavioural Wellness Centre at Inspira Health, has also said that if the condition is treated as so widespread that it becomes statistically normal, then the very need for accommodations will be undermined. In an editorial for the Journal of Psychology, Eric von Bonn refers to a study in which, of 232 school-aged children and adolescents with a pre-existing community diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, only 47% met research criteria for autism after an extensive diagnostic re-evaluation process. Yet, many were deemed to have been meeting DSM criteria or above the ADOS cutoff in prior records. Dr. Connor Davidson, autism champion at the Royal College of Psychiatrists, expressed concern that overdiagnosis meant people with treatable mental health conditions such as anxiety disorder or OCD could be mislabeled as autistic and miss out on potentially helpful treatments, but also celebrated the improvement from underdiagnosis in the past. As with many other serious issues, autism is often treated with levity on TikTok. This is reflected in the casual language used to refer to it, with many users talking about having a sprinkle of the tism, or saying neurospicy to refer to neurodivergent. It's normally those with autism using these phrases, but not always. And for those without autism, it's often treated as being endearing, such as in popular sounds.
I like that autistic man, and would I be wrong if I asked him at dinner, is you autistic?
Partners will post videos of their autistic boyfriends, and while the majority probably consent to these, it can feel a bit gross to turn someone's disability into content. TikTok also tends to have a very specific idea of autism, focusing on behaviour that is far from exclusive to autism, such as having obsessive interests. It doesn't take a lot of research to find that autism is not only a spectrum, but also has many symptoms and characteristics. In a blog post on the National Council on Severe Autism's website, Cindy Lambert expresses frustration with the state of affairs, lamenting that the autism I see in general on TikTok is hardly recognisable to me. The misinformation being shared is becoming increasingly dangerous to the autistics with more profound needs. You'll rarely see people with more severe autism joked about, such as those with symptoms that make independent living difficult. The form of autism that TikTok often jokes about may have historically been categorized as Asperger's syndrome. However, this is no longer considered a standalone diagnosis. Autism is often considered a hidden disability, which doesn't mean the struggles of those that have it are any less real. However, their experiences are often different from those that are visibly disabled. When live streaming on platforms such as TikTok, the audience is often immediately aware of visible disabilities, but are unlikely to immediately know if someone is neurodivergent. And the audience is often quick to let the streamer know that they know too. Unfortunately, this often takes the form of abuse, which is disappointing as creators are often trying to educate or normalize their conditions, removing the stigma around them. They'll patiently answer questions about their condition and clear up any misconceptions people have. Conversely, many comments will be pitying in tone, which I'd imagine isn't what disabled creators are looking for. The relationship of disabled creators with their audience is complicated by the gifting system that is a core part of streaming on TikTok. These can be a valuable source of income, especially those from lower income countries that benefit disproportionately from gifts from higher income countries. These creators often don't speak English and so don't understand the comments they receive, which may actually be for the best. These creators may be streaming out of financial necessity, a bleak illustration of the scale of global inequality. There is likely a mutual understanding that the audience is gawking, or just curious, to phrase it more generously, staring in a way that would rightly be considered rude in real life. This could also feel like the case for those with mental health issues who livestream. Viewers are able to get a glimpse into their world, but maintain a safe distance behind the barrier of the screen. I found alcoholics streaming themselves drinking, with most comments in the chat generally being empathetic, encouraging the streamer to stop drinking or go home. While these comments are well intentioned, they're naive about the complexities of addiction and the streamer's personal life. And while the gifts are an incentive for the creator to livestream, it's possible that it offers a means of connection. However, this is to an audience that's voyeuristic, with many commenters prying for details about the creator's circumstances. You can't help but feel they wouldn't be inclined to ask these questions were they to encounter them in real life, in the midst of the mental health issues they're struggling through. A concern, particularly in instances where little information is provided, is whether the subject is in control of the stream, potentially having been coerced or forced on camera. Disability can make people vulnerable to physical or psychological intimidation, and this is especially the case for those lacking autonomy, who are entirely dependent on others for care. An example of this is a creator I came across called Dementia Nan, a granddaughter who livestreams her grandma, who's clearly in the advanced stages of dementia and doesn't understand the situation she's in. Some comments express concern, but the granddaughter seems entirely unbothered. Another example I came across was an account called Music in the Dark, which livestreams a man holding a severely disabled boy, presumably his son, while music plays. These live streams receive a steady stream of gifts and supportive messages from the audience, with the page also having a showcase they receive commission from. The man in the stream doesn't speak in English, I think it may be Italian. However, he can be seen responding to messages even when there are none in the chat. Having noticed that he was streaming at all times of day, I compared recordings I'd made and soon realised that he was replaying previous streams, with no indication to the audience that this was the case. There's no way of even telling if it's the man running the account, and certainly no way of telling how much the subject benefits from the gifts. In contrast is Miles' journey. Miles is a child with stage 4 cancer, specifically neuroblastoma, and his mum regularly live streams him on TikTok while replying to comments from the chat. A friend of the family, Andrea, has also set up a GoFundMe, the proceeds of which go towards travel, food and accommodation. As of the time of making this video, they have raised £15,432 from this. It's difficult to argue with the ethics of live streaming a child in this context. Even though they're too young to comprehend and consent, this fundraising may save Miles' life or at least improve the quality of it. The crucial difference between Music in the Dark and Miles' journey is that the latter has transparency in the cause and the use of funding, whereas Music in the Dark fakes live streams and has no transparency about where the money goes. In Miles' instance, the money is being raised for healthcare costs, including indirect costs associated with disability and illness. The need to fundraise for treatment is an indictment of healthcare systems that fail to provide the best care for their people. The UK, where Miles is based, has universal healthcare, but is struggling after 14 years of underfunding and mismanagement by the government, and as a result, many have opted for private healthcare. In the US, many people struggle to afford the costs associated with healthcare due to a lack of insurance or the debilitating cost of excesses, with medical debt being a huge issue for many Americans. In 2020, there were 200,000 campaigns on GoFundMe for medical costs. These are just two country-specific examples, but they illustrate how governments can fail their populations under differing healthcare systems. Most people are hesitant to ask strangers for money, but the sometimes life or death nature of medical conditions puts them in a situation where they have no choice but to do so. For the audience giving gifts on TikTok, it's their way of doing something kind and alleviating others' financial pressure. A big problem though is that these gifts don't all go to the creator. While TikTok does have a donation feature, this is not the same as sending gifts to creators in need, and as a result, TikTok takes a hefty chunk of the monetary value of these gifts. Official donations on TikTok, free from fees, can only be sent to pre-selected organisations, done by its partner, Tiltify. This was a problem unearthed by the BBC in a 2022 article which found that displaced families in Syrian camps were begging on TikTok, only to be subject to fees of up to 70%. TikTok said it would take action, but it's unclear exactly what action has been taken, as I wasn't able to find any updates on this, and there are still numerous live streams of people begging. Social media can be vital to disabled people and those struggling with illness, especially those living in societies that fail to adequately support them. It acts as a way to connect with friends and is essential to connecting with the wider world, and while the onus shouldn't rest on disabled people to educate, it can be a powerful means of doing so should they choose to. For those who are able to monetize their online presence, it can be a vital source of income when facing financial difficulty. TikTok live streaming has become exactly this for those that are able to withstand the rampant ableism, or the often tactless curiosity. However, this becomes much more complicated when it involves those who have limited autonomy and or ability to consent. Showing a child's face when they're too young to understand the implications of TikTok live streaming is questionable, but can you really criticize the parents when it might save their life? In the example of Miles' journey we looked at, I'm sure his mum would rather she didn't need to live stream, but it's easy to make ethical judgments when removed from the situation. That being said, we can't be blind to the very real risk of exploitation, such as creators soliciting donations without transparency around their use. Fundamentally though, it's the responsibility of governments and platforms to ensure that vulnerable people aren't exploited in this context, and this is something they're clearly failing on. Platforms such as TikTok are all too happy to profit from these charitable gifts, but fail to properly moderate these live streams, or giving concerned users effective routes to getting them taken down. While governments, on the other hand, are consistently failing us in their responsibility to safeguard our health and well-being, especially those who are most vulnerable. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. What do you think about how disabled people are treated online? Are you disabled and have you experienced digital discrimination? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment down below, as well as a like and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. I release a new video every couple of weeks. Until next time, see ya!